Hello, I am Susanna Sheehan, the editor of the Duxbury Clipper. I want to thank all of our candidates for coming to this Candidates Forum, which is a new and exciting collaboration with the Clipper and PACTV, the local provider of government access programming. I will be moderating this forum along with Phil Thorne, a Duxbury resident. Let me explain the format. In this forum, we will be talking to the two candidates for town meeting moderator. The candidates will be introduced in alphabetical order. They will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and speak about who they are and why they are running for this elected office and what their qualifications are. Each candidate will then be asked 4 questions. Each person gets the same questions. They will have 2 minutes to answer the questions. The moderator reserves the right to ask a follow-up question. This question will be posed to each candidate, who will have 1 minute to answer. This will not be a debate. It is a chance for the candidates to let voters know who they are and where they stand on certain issues. Ready to begin? For our town meeting moderator candidates, we will have John Tuffy and Will Zachman. Mr. Tuffy will introduce himself first, and then Mr. Zachman will introduce himself. Mr. Tuffy, you have 2 minutes for an introduction. Please note, we are keeping time and will ask our candidates to stop speaking if they go over their allotted time. Mr. Tuffy.
Thank you. My name is John Tuffy, and I'm, as you know, running for moderator here in the town of Duxbury. I first moved to Duxbury about 30 years ago and have raised my family in Duxbury. My wife is a retired school teacher in town, and both my sons have graduated from Duxbury High School. During my time in Duxbury, I've been involved in a number of different town committees and boards. I was a member of the Finance Committee, the Fiscal Advisory Committee, the School Building Committee for the Chandler and Alden renovations, and a 3-term selectman in town. I'm currently a member of the Town Government Study Committee and the Duxbury Free Library Inc. Board. At a state level, I was the former president of the Association of Town Finance Committees, a member of the Board of Directors of the Mass Municipal Association, and a member of the Governor's Local Governmental Advisory Committee. I recently retired from the Silver Lake Regional School District, where for the past 8 years I was superintendent, and prior to that I was director of business services. I'm a believer in town meeting. I believe it is an opportunity for people to come and speak to the issues that concern them and affect their daily lives. As a moderator, I'd be committed to handling things in a neutral manner, to be even-handed and see that all sides of an issue are presented so a town meeting can make an informed decision. The moderator also appoints some 6 committees in town, and in appointing committees, my goal would be to have a balance on the committees so that all sides can be heard. If we have committees that represent not just new residents and residents that have been in town for a while, for senior citizens as well as younger families, we will have committees that have currency with town meeting, and when they make recommendations, they'll be listened to as they reflect the views of the community as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Tuffy. Now it's your turn, Mr. Zachman. Please introduce yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Will Zachman. I've lived in Duxbury since 1983, when my wife Betty, aka Elizabeth, and I moved down from Cambridge to our house on Standish Street, which I like to jokingly say was custom built for us in 1895. I've been involved with a variety of things around town. I was 5 years as elected member of the planning board and a bunch of other stuff that I won't bore you with. I am a big fan of town meeting. I'm a big fan of our town meeting form of government in Duxbury. It's the straightest form of democracy that you can get in the USA today. One of the reasons I'm so concerned about it is I figure if we can't make it work in Duxbury better than we do sometimes, it's not very good optimistic prospects for the nation as a whole. But you know, enough about me. If you want to know about me, just Google my name. You'll find me all over the place. Let's move on to talk about the subjects that are of concern in the questions today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zachman. Now it is time for the first question. Mr. Zachman, you will answer first. Remember, you have 2 minutes to respond. Question number 1. Some Duxbury residents are concerned about participation at town meeting and feel that changing the date of the meeting from the 2nd Saturday in March to the 1st Saturday in May will boost participation. Twice in the past 2 years, town meeting has considered this idea, and both times voters rejected it. Research done by Town Hall indicates that the highest participation in recent years of 1,273 people was driven by an issue, the new schools. Do you believe that moving the date of town meeting later in the spring will increase attendance? Do you have any suggestions for ways to get more people involved with the annual town meeting?
Frankly, I don't know what the outcome will be one way or the other. We'll find out if the Concerned Citizens petition is passed by town meeting, which I think it may very well be. They've done a really good job of coming up with some data that suggests that we probably would get a higher attendance with a May meeting than with a March meeting. But I don't really know for sure one way or the other. I'm very open on it. Whenever we have town meeting, though, we ought to have more participation than we do. Duxbury is historically awfully low in terms of participation of total number of voters at town meeting. And I think part of the reason is that people just don't understand the process well enough and don't get encouraged to come out and participate. There's sometimes a tendency of people who are, dedicated town meeting junkies, in which I could kind of include myself, I suppose, in certain ways, although from an outsider perspective rather than insider, to think it should belong to them and to not be very welcoming to the participation of others. One of the things I'll aim to do as moderator is to make sure that people are welcome at town meeting, that they it's clear to them what the procedures are, and that they can participate. People can make a difference in Duxbury. Town meeting is the legislative body of the town, and it is the right and duty of every citizen to take part in it. I think that's partly a matter of educating people, some of whom are not that familiar with how the town meeting works. I will aim to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zachman. Mr. Tuffy, I will ask you the same question, and you have 2 minutes to respond.
We don't know the answer to the question if it'll increase participation. We do know a couple of things, however. We know that when we have a hot topic, whether it's the building of a school or any other public building, when the budget is under question, when people are unhappy, they will come out to town meeting. And so is it driven by the data, or is it driven by the content? We need to find that out. The Government Study Committee is looking at some of those very questions, and depending on what this town meeting does, we may report about that next year. One of the things that we did see at the last town meeting was the move to electronic balloting. And what became clear during that discussion and in conversations afterwards, it was a reluctance of people to want to stand up and be counted, to vote in public. And the idea of being able to vote anonymously was attractive. I think that probably translates to people are maybe a little shy and embarrassed to ask questions at town meeting. They may sometimes believe that the questions they have aren't worthy of being asked. And so we need to make people comfortable to ask those kinds of questions, to be able to stand up and in front of a crowd and not feel intimidated by it. I do think if we move the town meeting, a couple of things happen, though. One is that the town departments will have more time to work on their budgets. I think we'll get better information. And instead of that race that starts in December when the selectmen approve a budget and gets pushed through the holidays and voted at a March town meeting, we will have some time outside of the holiday season when perhaps people will be more focused on what's going on, and that may in fact bring people out because now they have a chance to do some research before the meeting and not really catch up to what's happening the day of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tuffy. Now it's time for question number 2, and Mr. Tuffy will go first. There are some people who feel that having an open town meeting is too old-fashioned and puts too much power in the hands of too few people. Are you a staunch proponent of the open town meeting format, or would you support exploring the option of representative town meeting? Please give reasons in your answer.
One of the items that the Government Study Committee has identified is the idea of a representative town meeting, and that's something that it is looking into right now. I often think that we have representative town meeting. It's just they're self-selected. It's the same 250 people will come out to a town meeting, whether we hold it on the Saturday or midnight on Sunday. They will be there, except for those times when there is a hot topic, when people want to come out and be heard. I think the open town meeting form of government allows for people, when they feel they need to be heard, to come and be heard rather than have to work through a representative. Now, I will tell you, I am most comfortable with open town meeting. It's something I grew up with. I understand that if you didn't grow up in New England or didn't grow up in a small town, it's an alien form of government, and so we probably need to educate people as to how that works. For 3 years, my family and I moved to Wisconsin, where I lived in the city of West Bend, which was a city of 25,000 people, and we had a mayor and town council form of government, and I thought it felt very odd. I thought it was strange not to have that direct voice as to what was going on.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tuffy. Mr. Zachman, question 2, it's your turn.
I think it would be a pity and a shame if Duxbury were bamboozled into going to a representative town meeting. There's absolutely no reason for that, and any notion, anybody who thinks that a representative town meeting would somehow better represent the will of voters is, I don't know what they're smoking. Open town meeting is a precious, precious tradition. It is the most open form of democracy available. It is available for everybody to participate. And I don't think we should get into this thing of, let the people do it for us. Some other people do it, like they, do our lawn or clean our house. I think that the answer is to not go to a representative town meeting, which would really be sad, I think, but to encourage people to come out to town meeting. One example of that, for example, is to point out that you don't go to town meeting to ask questions. You can, but you really should try to inform yourself in advance. When a citizen stands up at open town meeting, often moderators in the past have said, "What is your question?" Wrong, absolutely wrong. The question is, what do you have to say on the warrant article that is currently, the motion that is currently on the floor? The people assembled at town meeting are the legislative body of the town. They are not petitioner citizens bowing before the existing town boards to ask questions. They are there as voters to represent themselves and to express their opinions and to debate the issues. The other thing is just education generally. People need to understand, have ways to learn better. The town meeting is their town meeting and that they need to come out and participate, period.
Thank you, Mr. Zachman. This is question number 3, and this is for you, Mr. Zachman. There have been complaints that town meeting is too long in Duxbury and that other towns can get their meetings done in one evening session. Past town meeting moderators have often let debate go on longer than people feel it should, which stretches out town meeting and can make people not want to attend due to the time commitment. Do you feel that Duxbury's town meeting is too long? And how would you handle a lot of debate on one issue? Do you have any suggestions for ways to shorten the amount of time it takes to get through town meeting?
I think that one of the key contributors to the pace of town meeting is the way that the moderator conducts town meeting. And there's a couple of aspects to that. One of them is the moderator needs to know the rules by which town meeting is regulated. Just as when you play bridge or cribbage or soccer or lacrosse or football or baseball, there's a set of rules. And the moderator needs to understand those rules. If the moderator is not clear on what the rules are, and we've had times in the past where the moderator has to go consult with town council to try to figure out what's going on. If the moderator is on top of the game, understands it, thoroughly knows the rules as specified in town meeting time, which governs it, that helps to move it along. Second thing is that the moderator needs to be a people manager in the sense of the psychology of it, and to not allow things to go on indefinitely that go nowhere, while at the same time give people the opportunity to speak. One of the things that gets in the way in town meeting is when people, because they're discouraged from participating by saying what they want to say and have been encouraged to ask questions. So you get people who come in with a question that they come up with at the last minute. And they haven't done their research, but it gives them an opportunity to take the floor and ask a question, and ask a question, and ask a question. I would work to encourage people to do their homework in advance and to come prepared to debate the issues. That's what town meeting is supposed to be about. And I think that if we do that, we can have a much more brisk town meeting than we have sometimes had in the past.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zachman. Mr. Tuffy, the same question is asked of you.
There are times that town meeting can drag. Now, town meeting, I think, gets chunked up into 4 separate sections. There's the work that happens before town meeting, and I think we do an excellent job with that. We come to town meeting, the information's available, and we have worked in these last few years to make sure that more handouts are available in the outer area, and we now have a screen where you can read the motions to speed things up. I think the presentations on occasion get a little long. I think sometimes the presenters want to make sure that everybody hears it, and they sometimes repeat themselves a number of times, and I think that that can be done to help shorten it. And then we actually get to the discussion. I think part of that is town meeting needs to understand that it's not just the moderator who is controlling the pace of the meeting, but it is the town meeting themselves, that they need to be an active participant in that. And so I think the moderator can and should, on occasion, make noises about, I think we've heard that before, is there anything new to be added to try to move things along? And there is always the opportunity for somebody in the audience to stand up and move the question, to say, we've had enough. The debate needs to end, and now is the time to vote on the item. So I think if the public understands what their rules are and what their role is, that we can speed up the discussion part of it. The voting part, we're going to electronic voting. We'll see how it works. That seems to have the potential to speed things up. If it does, then maybe all of those things together will help shorten the pace, shorten town meeting and increase the pace.
Something that Mr. Zachman said. Could you, starting with Mr. Zachman and then Mr. Tuffy, explain, maybe give an example of how you think the people you were speaking about can better understand the rules of town meeting? Literally, what mechanism could they have?
Well,
you have 1 minute, sorry.
Sure. The first is that, you know, I'd encourage people to go look at town meeting time and get a little familiar with it. That would help, certainly. I think the moderator can play a role by explaining things as they go along, making it clear. If the moderator gets lost, as has sometimes happened about what's going on, it's not surprising that the people should occasionally be confused. So I think that's a big part of it. But a project I've talked about for a long time and will try to push as moderator is to do a student town meeting government day with a model student government sponsored in the high school, studying the procedures, and then going through a model town meeting, you know, at the school. And I think that would be a great way not only to educate the youngsters in the school about it, but to educate their parents as well. Because lots of people come to town from places where there is no town meeting, they're not familiar with it, and we need to educate them too.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tuffy, the same question to you. How can people better understand the rules of town meeting?
You know, I think we as a town, we as moderators, should engage in education with the public. We look at town meeting. There are a number of people who are there every year, and to try to talk to them about how town meeting works is to preach to the converted. So the question really comes, how do we best deal with that? Now dealing with the next generation of town meeting goers is a wonderful idea, but I think the question is, what do we do about the people who are there today, who are adults and are going to vote? And perhaps we can partner with the Newcomers Club. Is there an opportunity to run an open forum? You know, a number of years ago, we used to run a pre-town meeting. It used to be held at the middle school gym, middle school auditorium, and we would go through each of the articles. Many of the questions that people would have, they'd ask at that meeting. Now, it stopped because the attendance fell off, but maybe the time has come to look at something like that, to have people be able to come in, ask their questions at that time, and then see how the procedures work. So by the time they get to town meeting, they're comfortable. It's not a surprise. Nothing seems foreign.
Thank you, Mr. Tuffy. This is the final question, and we will begin with you. The town has budgeted funds for voters to use the electronic handheld voting devices at the annual town meeting. The purpose of using them is speed and privacy. Do you favor the use of these devices? Why or why not? If not, do you have any other ideas to protect voters' privacy?
When this was proposed last year, my initial reaction was I was not in favor of it. I felt that it was $35,000 that we could probably find something better to do with, and in fact, that's not the way town meeting works. Town meeting is that opportunity to stand up and be counted. I listened to the debate that happened during the town meeting, talked to people afterwards, and came to realize that I think my thinking was from a different time and place. My thinking was from people who grew up with town meeting. And in fact, people were uncomfortable with standing up and being counted. So if it turns out that it helps speed up town meeting, if it turns out to be a successful venture, we only tried it with a few articles last year. This year we're going to try to do the entire town meeting with it. And if the reaction afterwards is, I like it, I think it makes me feel more comfortable, if we make people feel more comfortable at town meeting, I think that's a good thing. So the jury's out, we have to see what happens. I guess the other thing that I would say is that just because we are starting it now doesn't mean it'll happen forever. I think perhaps we sometimes get a little bound not only in process but in tradition. That just because we've done it a certain way for a number of years doesn't mean we shouldn't be open to looking at doing things differently.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Tuffy. Mr. Zachman, the same question to you, sir.
I actually favor doing whatever town meeting decides to do. At the moment, that decision is in favor of doing the electronic voting. My personal view on the electronic voting is that it's got sort of a plus, a minus, and a neutral. The plus is that it allows for effectively a secret ballot, although that's very different from the traditional way, but I think that there may be some significant advantages to that. The minus is that it costs money, taxpayers' money, and I always like to see as little taxpayers' money spent as possible. And the neutral, in my opinion, has to do with whether it speeds up the meeting. I actually don't think it speeds up the meeting. I think that the pace of the meeting and how long it takes to get things done, I think the single biggest factor there is the conduct of the moderator, the knowledge of the moderator, and the ability of the moderator to work with people who go on, as I sometimes have done. I confess in the past. I'm making a commitment to you, the voters, that Saturday at town meeting, I will not speak on the floor at town meeting, and that'll be a first for a long time, because as a moderator, you can't be taking positions. So I'm going to practice being the moderator. If I start jumping up to the podium and talking at town meeting, vote for my opponent. But otherwise, maybe you'll want to think about voting for me.
Thank you, Mr. Zachman.
Thank you very much. So this concludes our candidates forum for our town meeting moderator candidates. I thank you both very much for participating in this and wish you the best of luck at the town election.